Welcome, Bart. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kerri. I'm happy to be here and happy to collaborate.
Yeah, I'm excited because we're talking about the sales process today, one of your favorite things. I know that you are extremely passionate about the sales process and you have a really good reason why. So I'm excited to hear all about that. So why don't you start by how you got excited about the sales process and then what that
Sales
led to?
process. I think everybody traditionally is scared of hearing about, like, we have a sales process or we should follow a sales process, but it's for the most part, what we've experienced and what I've experienced is most companies overcomplicate it exponentially. So it becomes really a catch-all for everything that every org thinks should be happening through a selling process. Where a SaaS tech team, as an example of sales, pre-sales, post-sales, the process that is for them, and it is for the customer experience. And if you follow the process consistently, then the experience that the customer receives is excellent. And in fact, one of the best practices on a sales process is to explain your process to your customer. They are pleased by that because then they don't get surprised and they know what's expected of them. So there's a couple of real key points here. A sales process is a guide. It usually has stages and or assets associated with it. But the trick is, or the best practice is, that the guide and the assets should be mutual between sales, pre-sales, post-sales, where the data is shared. And then at the same time, it should be directly relevant to the customer understanding the journey they're going on. So a leader gets it. The leader gets to share what's expected of the selling team, right? Selling team shares it with the customer. Customer knows what's expected of them and what to expect of the selling team. It's so simple.
And I like what you said about it being for the customer too. So we've even talked to our own customers who call it different things, or there are a lot of words that are very similar, customer engagement, buyer process,
Yeah.
sales playbook even. Could you go into kind of what the difference between a sales playbook and a sales process might be?
Yes. Yeah. So great, great question. And everyone will describe this different. And that's totally okay. But the premise is the sales process itself is the multi-step or multi-stage sequence that you engage a client with. And most importantly, the gates that are measured, either hard or soft, from moving from stage to stage. Okay, that's the sales process. 5 stages, 7 stages, everybody's different. I say less is more, simple is better. The playbook can be unique, and there can be multiple, and that playbook sits within the stages of the sales process and is multi-step. So you have stages and steps. So sales process stages, sales playbook steps. And a playbook could be industry specific, could be product specific, solution offering specific. And those tend to have unique messaging in them or unique needs for those specific examples, but they still follow the sales process that is defined by the company. And the reason that's really important to delineate is the sales process is fixed, and it's how you gauge opportunity qualification. It's how you gauge opportunity trajectory through the sales process over time, maturity and health of the opportunity, because it is about data collection and data sharing. But the playbook itself is specific to what you're selling.
One of the things I really like when you talk about sales process is that you describe it as one, the foundational layer, so that the things that everyone aligns to,
Yeah.
and the second is you use nested dolls, right? like uh,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a great way. So I love the concept of everything has to fit together. And so if we or anybody is not treating their sales process as, if you think about the start of a process as a top left, then as you go through your sales process, you become more intimate, you get more detail, you're building a chapter book for you and your team and your prospect and or customer. So it all has to fit together. So if you go from top left to bottom right when you're done, it comes to it's a book essentially, or it's nested, it's chapters. It all fits together perfectly. And if we're not thinking about it that way, then I don't know what we're doing, honestly. So as a leader, and this is different perspectives during our dialogue here. As a leader, I have to understand the chapter book and how it flows together in order to run a predictable business. So my sales process and my playbooks and the teams that use it, as well as the customer that collaborates with us through the process, all of that data, it's all shared. It's common. We need it, and it should fit into that nested book. And that's the simplest way for me to explain it. So it's not just a bunch of activities that we should list out. Those are important, but the process itself is the process becomes more powerful the more specific it is, and the more we uncover the cross section of value between the sales process stages and the sales playbook steps, where the role, the data, and the tool overlap. That's where value and speed comes from. And most of us overcomplicate it. But you got to be old and have done it for 20 years to realize it's an anchor. It's an anchor for the relationship that you're building between your customer and your prospect and buyer, your company and the customer or prospect. It's enduring data. It should be built that way, and it should not be a piece of paper that sits on the side. You run your business based on it if you define it the right way.
Yeah, why don't I use this time to go ahead and share an example? Okay, so hopefully you're seeing that.
Yeah, very basic sales process, sales playbook, and then a qualification methodology, MeddPicc underneath.
Okay, so I'm going to see if you'll take us through this. So, like you said, at the top, we have example stages, and these are just example names. So this is kind of what we built into Scalibrium here, the ability to do what we're describing right now. So talk us through that beginning part, your early sales process, your discovering outcomes. What are you doing right here with value?
Perfect. So we always, all of the best practices and those that I've learned from and those that I coach and collaborate with, we anchor on, there's a common theme that is absolutely required in the beginning of every engagement with a client. And it's the alignment of us as a company or as a selling team and the buyer and their buying team to build trust. Because without it, especially in the enterprise, you can't compete. It's all about the buyer's experience with the selling team that's servicing them. So we anchor on building trust first, and we define building trust through what we call a value map, a value stack, a value pyramid. You can call it whatever you want. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's out there in the industry, and we all now are just talking about this, where if you set on a handful of categories that allow you to prepare and communicate with your prospect and or buying team in alignment with their business and their needs and how we solve that problem, a light bulb goes off for them. Like, okay, this selling team is disciplined. They have done their homework and their research. They understand my company. They've earned credibility. We're going to continue to collaborate. It is really that simple. It has nothing to do with your products. It has the product you're selling. It has everything to do first with understanding the company that you're selling to, what is important to them, how they are maybe running into challenges executing what's important to them and their company, and then how your technology or your product solves to that problem. But you can't talk about the product until you gain concurrence, that you understand their objectives, their strategies, and their corporate initiatives, which are typically funded, their IT challenges that are getting in the way, if you're selling an IT solution or a security solution, whatever it may be, of your offering. And then you have the ability to be aligned and talk intelligently with them rather than them feeling like they're being sold a product. It's really, I'm simplifying it because it is that simple. Now, once you understand that baseline fundamental concept, 5 categories in a map, value stack, value pyramid, how the customer benefits from your technology solving to those categories, and you get them to touch it, right? You're gonna collaborate with them. We've done this together, Kerri, recently. We showed our value map to a client. Client goes, "Oh, I would change this. I don't agree with that. Like, change this word. This word doesn't resonate for me in our company." But by default, that means we are now on the right path. They have contributed to the value map, and it is the anchor for presentations we're going to deliver to them. And that's a win. So if we break it down and make it that simple, but we put it into practice as step 1 or the anchor for a sales process and a sales playbook, we have a higher propensity of winning, of being trustworthy in the eyes of our prospect or client. And most important, my team that I work with at my company, my selling team, we all have to center on the value map, value stack, value pyramid, because then we are one company and the customer doesn't have to explain anything to us. We all follow that anchor. And it changes the dynamics completely. It just makes it professional. There's no fear or stress. We're following a process.
Exactly. And we've had other guests who've just talked about this concept of, customers expect you to know them. Show me you know me. And doing that research is just what is expected. They want you to come with these ideas, trusted catalyst, all these ways. And the way you do that is by really showing them that you know the business right at the beginning.
Yeah, there's now, for those that are watching and learning, and we've collaborated on the same topic with so many different people, it's the same exact sales process. It's the same exact value-based value map, value stack, value pyramid anchor, regardless of the complexity of the opportunity. You don't know the complexity of the opportunity until you get into the process. So, if I'm a commercial sales rep or a commercial sales leader, the normal response is, "Oh, we're a transactional business. We don't need that."
We don't need that. Yeah.
Well, that's actually incorrect. You do. You just need you just need to do it in a lighter weight fashion, but you follow the same exact process and playbook, and that separates you from others that are selling into the same account. And the punchline will come at the end, because remember the beginning comment of the Matryoshka, the nesting, Russian nesting dolls, or the chapter book that you're creating through your sales process and your sales playbook execution. All of that data that we're sharing back and forth with our clients, well, that all should create a deliverable. And that deliverable is what travels, regardless of the size of your transaction, through the company that you're selling to. We've always called it a champion sell deck, because you work on your value map with your potential champion.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll get into that.
So why don't we talk about that second stage, in terms of building the champions, the importance of having champions, tools that you might use, processes that are really important to identify, test, and
Yep.
help them sell for you. So why don't you start by defining your version of champion and then go into what's important at this stage?
Okay. So there are many different ways to describe it, a champion. And the ultimate confusion is that most people think they have a champion, but they have not tested them or taught them how a value map could be used for them to sell on our behalf as they are going for funding on the transaction we're pursuing, as an example. So I like to call the connective tissue. We've heard that. We've called the steel thread. That's what I like to call it. So a value map, value stack, value pyramid, and a champion go together. So if someone doesn't bite on the logic behind the value map and begin to contribute to it with you, they likely are not a potential champion. And that's a very natural progression of taking what you've discovered and collaborated on via value map and going further. Who might I be able, John, Susie, Alice, whomever. We've both collaborated on this value map. Who might this be shared with that I can collaborate with, and we can understand more on how this would apply within your company? Oh, I don't know. Let me think about it. Not a champion. Probably someone that doesn't have the conviction that we need to get you to the next level. Or, oh, that's Joe, and Joe knows exactly what the initiative is that I'm trying to solve to. Let me get you an introduction to Joe. He's actually a vice president, or he's actually a change agent, or he's actually a line of business executive, and they benefit from what we're trying to do. And they get you the meeting. They don't just send you on a path to go find them on your own. A coach would give you the name, maybe. A champion is someone that you're testing throughout the process, building the relationship with, and they shepherd you through the process of selling your technology to solve their problem, and then they sell on your behalf because you're collaborating throughout the entire process with them. And champions know the business challenges that are in the way of the corporate objective, the strategies, and the initiatives. We might guess at that, but the champion validates it. The champion gives you that information and then gives you the people and takes you to the people by the hand down the hall or via an introduction to take it to the next level. And then now I'm simplifying it because in a legacy type business, we know this takes some large transactions take 9 months, 12 months, even longer. But what we know from history, if we anchor on the value map and if we anchor on champions and we collaborate to validate that we have them right, we can compress our selling cycle because we are working to qualify out through that process. If they're not contributing back, giving us the introduction, taking us down the hall, we have more work to do. We got to go deeper into the organization and execute this process again with different people on our own until we find the champion. Test them often, build their knowledge, and then continue. And it never stops. It just compounds.
And before we leave the topic of champions, you mentioned champion decks, and could you describe them and how you used them in the past? And I know you also like that closed loop communication, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's the use of the champion deck is the reuse of data. There's so many different tools out there today, whether you're recording your call or you're note taking. The data is the gold. We learned this in our days of unstructured data at Splunk, where this whole concept of what we're doing at Scalibrium, that's where the genesis was. The data it travels through the opportunity and you continue to collect and share, collect and share, collect and share. And the champion deck is the readout of all of that data. It's the chapter book. It's the chapter book that's titled just like your sales process, if you can title it the right way, or it's titled in the words that the prospect gives you because they want it to sound like their business. Mm-hmm. And when we get something like that from that prospect, those are small wins that could indicate we've got a possible champion that understands the value map, that is taking us on the journey and giving us information to make our journey more in alignment with their process. And those are indicators that you're on the right path. It gets I'm oversimplifying, it gets way more nuanced, as we go under the covers, but because we're dealing with people, we're dealing with money, we're dealing with political environments, we're dealing with so many different things that we don't control. But we can control these two things. We've talked about a value map, and we've talked about champions, which help us understand business and technical challenges, validate our value map, and give us introductions. And if we center on that, the simplicity of that, then that guides us through our day. And it actually makes the process compelling to the buyer and easier for us as sellers, pre-sellers, or post-sellers.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to stage 3 in terms of developing that solution? So this is when you're starting to get a lot more mature in the conversations, and now you're going to bring in things like, a mutual action plan, or what we used to call mutual sequence of events.
Yep.
Get into those proof of value events and so on, and really start to show more on the return of investment. So why don't you talk through that?
Perfect example. So we're in stage 2 of the process. We're in step 3 of a playbook. Okay. So we're starting to align our solution backwards to what we learned from our engagements with our potential champion on business challenges and technical challenges that are getting in the way of initiatives that drive the company, strategies that are super important for them to execute, and their corporate objective. Now you can see the flow or the nesting of the information into a big narrative. The ultimate test. We're in this right now with one of our clients, and we have sold and aligned our solution to our champion. They are excited, and we know they're excited because they have introduced us to the architecture review team. They have introduced us to the security and compliance team. We've already reviewed data governance. We're only in the second stage of the sales process, and we have a champion tested and validated because they believe enough in how we solve their challenges, aligned to their corporate needs with our technology, that they're setting up these meetings. So we have solution alignment, we have technical alignment, we have business alignment, and now we're making real progress because we've met more people. We've either passed certain thresholds within their company, but I can defensively say in my company, if I'm a sales rep or a sales leader, hey, this is a healthy opportunity. Let me explain why. So many weeks has passed, but I've achieved value map alignment, value stack, value pyramid alignment. I've found and tested a champion, and they've validated all of this information with me, and they've introduced me to other people that have to approve and allow us to move forward as a viable solution. That is huge progress. I can't tell you how many times as a leader, and a line leader, a midline leader, or an executive on a forecast call with a new team or at a new company where we're trying to understand how the business is run. Sellers are trying to forecast opportunities, and they can't answer those simple 3 categories in a playbook and the 2 stages of a sales process. They give us a number. Well, that is one factor or single factor forecasting on revenue that is not a professional seller. It is not a professional leader, and certainly is not a company that is run professionally. It's an unfortunate truth. You can't just forecast revenue. You have to forecast the health of the opportunity based on defined elements in your playbook and your sales process, so that you have some normalization of data over time. It makes you a better seller, makes you a better leader, makes you more valuable to your company, makes your prospect and customer respect you and appreciate you, because it isn't about the number at first. It is about the process and the method that gets you credibility to build to the number that you're going to sell, the ARR, the services, or whatever it may be.
So I know in that specific example, what we're starting to talk about now that, we've really started to showcase the solution and everything are things like, how do we deliver on a timeline to get to the compelling event that they have? I think a big part of a sales process is knowing when they might need something and trying to work backwards from there. So yeah. I know in that particular example, we're really starting to try and ensure that customer is following a mutual sequence of events, and then talking to them more about value, what does success metrics look like, and so on. So why don't we drill into that a little bit?
Yep, certainly. So there's some nuance in what we're describing, but it's pretty clear that all of these are mini tests of alignment throughout a process. And I would say the first three are table stakes, meaning they're the minimum to be a professional seller. And if it's a higher velocity transaction, it just means it's a lesser amount of data. But you still collect it, and you still document it, and you still share it back by closing the loop through the process. If it's a highly complex sale, that just takes longer, and your depth of information is deeper. It's longer. You're collaborating more intensively with your prospect and your customer through the process, but nothing else changes. The sales process is the same. The sales playbook in this case is the same. The tools and/or the skills required are the same. Value mapping, champion testing, finding testing and building, and then solution alignment. So we're building upon it. Now, the timeline, you can't, what you hope happens, or actually hope's the wrong word. Your goal through this entire process is to organically uncover some type of definitive date or some type of objective that they are trying to meet while running their business that their current state doesn't allow them to meet. And that usually comes out organically. If you just ask it in the beginning, you're like everybody else. What's your compelling event? Or what keeps you up at night? Like you can't. These are the most junior approaches, and it's just inexperience. And it's not taking the profession seriously when those are the questions you ask. You uncover those organically. And as your business acumen improves through your career and through your relationship with the customers you sell to, you learn business acumen. That's the beauty of this profession, is you get better over time. And business is what drives need, is what drives purchases for technology, is what has to map to timelines that are required to meet corporate objectives, initiatives, and strategies. And then the people involved have their own personal needs that need to be met. They might be compensated somehow. They might be solving a very big corporate problem. They may be associated personally, deeply with that initiative. The only way to learn those things is to then introduce the concept of mutual agreement. Yet another test. So your timeline. Many will say you can interchange some of the needs in defining times and dates of doing something. When you have a champion, they'll give you a date, they'll give you a person, and they will give you the introduction so that you can go achieve that objective by a certain date. You can even start with the end in that type of conversation. The timeline is all about when the problem needs to be solved, and backing up to when all of the things that have to be done to get to the purchase so that you can deploy and solve the problem. And that gives you your guide. It gives you the real answer of, can this transaction be closed mutually in agreement with my client and prospect by a specific date that solves that problem? And when does that date organically sit within my company's calendar quarter? So my quarter is irrelevant as a seller. It's odd to hear that, but everybody that drops their close date on the day before the end of a quarter means they're just inexperienced in the way they're doing their job. It's probably the worst mistake most sellers have, is they choose the close date. The close date is up to the customer and the prospect, and our job is to create as much urgency as possible by uncovering pain, by uncovering risk, by uncovering need, aligning our solution, helping our champion narrate, making sure it maps to value, and then through the sequence of events process, exposing what those dates are and gaining commitment from your client to meet those dates.
Nice.
An informal discussion. So this is by no means meant to be a fully in-depth training on it. It's just, this is a conceptual discussion of how it gets applied.
Yeah.
And I think that's where most people miss the point on a sales process, a playbook, and tools and assets that live throughout that journey and how they're used. It's very simple if you think about it that way.
Yeah. I heard a really great example from Samantha Flax, one of our guests, who is in advertising sales. She's like, the more mature I got in selling, the more I started to recognize the seasonality of the people we were selling to. Her example was that in advertising sales, usually around the holiday time, the spend is higher. And she said what that meant is usually around the summertime, you really needed to get that timeline in place so that by the time they wanted to run those ads for the holidays, all of the paperwork was buttoned up. You could show the outcomes and then hit the dates.
So think about that. You think about what you just described. If your buyer they're getting ready for peak season, they have they're an internal objective to prepare for that they're collaborating with other people. Anything a seller can do, a selling team can do to align to their process and help them achieve those objectives with their service, that is an endearing alignment, and it is what professional sellers do really well. So Samantha, knowing this seasonality in her industry, she already probably has her vernacular down, has her process and her steps down, knows when to start it to get the most out of the relationship with her clients, speaks their language, writes their language in the champion deck or the client book, and therefore is doing by default the buyer's job with them, making their job easy. That is professional selling. It's not transactional. It's highly defined and prescribed. Now, that gives you a healthy chance of forecasting revenue at a specific time, and then understanding the health of the relationship and the specific opportunity by collaborating through the process. Highly predictable approach. I'll give you another example, and back from our experience at Splunk. In retail, online and digital, same seasonality, right? So holiday weekends where there's big digital sales, or holiday seasons in general, end of the year, high demand for data, an understanding of a critical business service and the data associated with it to ensure uptime for revenue, no downtime for loss of revenue, and highly compliant, risk-free services being delivered over the wire digitally. So We learned that at Splunk over time. So we began to message that way with our clients. They, by default, came closer to us. Oh, yes, we are doing that. The season is approaching. This service is changing, and we do need to ensure we understand every aspect of it so we can go as fast as we can reduce risk, and we can reduce cost. And we would build our business cases around that collaboratively with them, endearing ourselves to them, helping them solve to their challenge of providing an exemplary customer service during a high volume period through our technology. It's a story, and it's a beautiful story. It's elegant because we are them. We become a true business partner and not it's not, you're not being a salesperson. You're solving a business problem. And that's what this is all about. And if a customer doesn't get to the point, or a prospect doesn't get to the point where they're aligning you with you to their problem, you're not deep enough into the understanding of the relationship yet.
Bart, thank you for sharing the timeline examples. Why don't we talk proof? So we've been talking alignment and how you can bring in more people to the selling cycle, like your pre-sales person. That's really where, that collaboration is so important. I know at Splunk, we stopped calling it proof of concept when we would do, these lengthy engagements, and started
Proof of
calling it proof
value.
of value, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so talk to us about this part.
Yeah. So, proof is different at every company. Some companies don't have the process because they don't need it. Maybe it's purely product led, and customers buy on their own, and then they prove. The selling team has to prove value down the road when they're further adopted into a product led platform. However, in the most traditional sense, the proof of value is nothing more than proving your technology solves to their business problems based on their agreed timeline, aligned with your solution, their champion solving to their technical problems that were previously defined via the value map. So it all strings together. It's the nesting approach. So now, proof of value is a gate. If we learn early, and by the way, we always spend the most time in the first 3 steps of a sales process, or the first few steps of the sales playbook, because it uncovers the most information. You can't race past any of this. And if you have to do a proof of value, then you're likely earning the right for a business case, because unless a prospect or a customer agrees that they're going to participate, provide resources, and collaborate with you on building a business case that your proof of value validates and delivers the outcomes for, you've missed. So the proof of value and the readout of the proof of value while you're doing your combination of technical capability and business case refinement is all combined. You have to talk about them together, and most companies, depending on the size of your transaction, need a business case to justify the technology purchase, which is what proves the value. And that's how the process works. Now, there's 15 methodologies that are out there. This is methodology agnostic. These steps in a playbook are dynamic. The steps in the sales process, others will have different opinions on how they work together. It doesn't matter what methodology you have. These are what we call anchor points. Mm-hmm. You can't apply any methodology unless you are good at these anchor points. And proof of value, mutual agreement via a timeline, and a business case. This is the ultimate. It's the ultimate gate. It's the go, no go. You're not going forward unless you're aligned on all of these. And that's how you know whether you're in the game the right way.
Yeah, I think my favorite examples on the proof side are when the sales engineer and the sales rep are so aligned that when that that, either customized demo or they're proving out use cases via decision criteria, it all starts with the same value map. They're like, okay, here are the problems that you're trying to solve and the initiatives that you're trying to meet. And let me show you how our solution can do that. And that total alignment, like you're describing, and the way it builds together starts to become such a common vernacular that they don't know how to do it any other way, because it makes so much sense both to the people that are selling and the people that are hearing it.
I like to, so it's new. This is a nuanced approach, meaning you become very redundant, but that's the idea. There's no, you can't will a prospect or a customer to buy. You just can't.
No.
You have, especially in large complex transactions. You can maybe meet them if it's a small transaction. Timing could have you meet them right at the point of their need, and then the transaction's done. We've bought technology that way, but they're small transactions. Big, large, complex transactions that make careers for people, that truly provide a learning experience by doing it for the first time, changes your trajectory in your career as a seller and as a technical seller. Where this all comes to a crescendo is right in this proof stage, where you're trying to understand the timeline, how you're going to prove value, and what the business case is, and you're doing it collectively as a selling team. None of this is a one-off. It is the same language: sales, pre-sales, post-sales. If you have the value consultant privilege of having that role, all four of you should absolutely be aligned on the narrative. And in every meeting, that narrative, or the value map as an anchor, is the starting point. Because if you got it right, you're speaking their language, they contributed, the challenges, they validated it, they've given you access, they've agreed to the timeline and the sequence of events. You're building the proposal, the business case, and the champion sell deck, whatever you want to call it, organically. That's it. This is where most of the work happens.
Yeah, I think, why don't we just go a little bit deeper on the financial side for a second? You mentioned how important it is that it all goes together. We did have a guest who talked about, financials don't need to be scary. It's all about showing just that you understand a business, but you need to understand their business. And it starts by knowing what metrics matter to them, and then making sure that that's what you showcase back in the financials. And I know, Bart, you brought in value assessment, this whole approach and strategy to Splunk. And I'm wondering if you can talk to, those large engagements that might have a value consultant, and even the smaller ones where, you're still able to present a business case with some compelling financials without maybe that lengthy value assessment process.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this question is it really our value assessment approach, which I learned this from two of the best in the industry, Doug May, Scott Lewis. Right? These are Dick Thomas, another one that was great at the value map. These are common practices, highly complex in our minds. However, it has to align to the business outcome that the prospect or the client is attempting to achieve. And it is time and collaboration that uncovers all of the relationships between the process we're solving or the process we're trying to help go faster or reduce risk in or cost out, depending on what we're selling. So it becomes a discussion around workflows. It becomes a discussion around how people interact with workflows. It becomes a discussion around how workflows contribute to a critical business service being successful or not. It doesn't have to be highly technical. It can be business specific, but your customer and us as a selling team have to align mutually on what that business case is and what the proper levers are that their company will respect, appreciate, and believe in. So it's not generic in any way. And we start somewhere on this process, and we know throughout the process very collaboratively. It's not an interrogation, it's a collaborative approach, whether or not they're willing to co-build a business case with us. And I'm genericizing a little bit because if we talked specifically about business cases, we would get the expert. Like Doug May, these guys that are experts in this, they have dozens and dozens and dozens of calculators that are built specific to use cases over time, that you bring multiple use cases together and then you feather different calculators together to read out an outcome that's possible. And unless that business case outcome is agreed upon with multiple players at the company you're selling to and collaborating with, and you get an introduction to present it with the economic buyer, with finance, with whomever you have collaborated with, that introduction and that test, that's a strong indication that you've done it the right way. Mm-hmm. If you're doing it if you're just doing it and they want you to simply send it to them, you probably missed the mark. It's it's risky, right? So the levels of complexity depends on what you're selling and how you're selling it, and it's defined in many ways how the prospect on the other side is agreeing to or not agreeing to collaborate with you. And that's an indication of the health and predictability of your opportunity. So here's what we haven't talked about, but we have in an indirect way. So MeddPicc, all of those, the acronym. So MeddPicc, 1C, 2Cs, 2 Ps, 1 P. It's different for the company that you're working for because depending on your ecosystem and who's involved, your acronym might change. But we have uncovered organically metrics through this process. We've tested our champion to get an introduction to our economic buyer. We have likely begun to discuss how they're going to decide to buy because we're aligned to a critical business service. They may have a date in mind that they have to ensure it's up based on seasonality. They're telling us and sharing us because we've earned that with us because we've shared with them and built their trust. There might be a partner involved. If not, we avoid that. Through all of this process, all of the metrics or all of the acronym of MeddPicc are surfaced organically. And there's a few that we have to be intentional about. But I'm here to tell you, if you execute a standard sales process, this is why it matters, and a standard sales playbook with anchor-based assets by stage, just through conversational relationship building that are centered on these assets and categories, MeddPicc, MeddPicc, whatever your company uses, organically surfaces. And then you have to continuously validate them over time. So you don't go in and say to your prospect, well, what's your metric, or who's the economic buyer, or what's your decision process, or come on. We're building a professional long-term relationship. It organically comes out. We professionally uncover and test it. They put their hands on the keyboard and the process with us. So we get these checkpoints that allow us to gauge the health of the opportunity. We've done modeling on this, thousands of interactions in big, complex transactions. Nothing happens without pure alignment. Nice. And the only way to make it predictable is to follow the process.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for going into MeddPicc. you've had all of these successful engagements where it's a collaboration. Talk to us a little bit about what adoption looks like and why it's so important for, like you mentioned
Yeah.
before, the overall health of the, the lifetime health of that person you're selling to or company.
Your CS team and your PS team must be in that collaborative state with the prospect and the customer before you go to contract, because they're the people that are going to create the experience once the customer buys. And the experience is, are you going to deploy what I bought? Because there's a direct relationship with scope creep and deployment of what's purchased. So the more aligned we are, the faster the time to value is, the happier the customer is, then the net retention from buying subsequent capacity or licenses or whatever it gets compressed. It happens sooner, and then you get a stronger net retention rate. So it becomes back to landing, adoption, expansion, and then a renewal or lifetime customer value. You have to bring your CS and your PS team in. If you don't have that into your selling process or your playbook, you've missed a huge opportunity to create a strong deployment.
One of my favorite things about OutSystems was we had the concept of readiness, and I think we're trying to also bring that into the platform. But are they even ready to adopt? Right? Is their team ready? Is the tech ready? From an implementation perspective. Have they been trained? All of these things are what you're talking about now, so that when it does get ink to paper, that they are set up for success. And I think that's really important in terms of alignment internally as a buying team. And then everybody starts to see, what do those adoption plans look like, so that the customer health or the customer is healthy when they do actually complete the transaction.
Yeah. So let me make a link, because my professional brethren out there, or those that in my network that have coached and developed me in this process, would say that the link between the adoption plan, the business case, and the proof of value has to be so tight in order to meet a deployment objective, to ensure the business case is time bound and valid matters.
Yeah.
Because then it's called the fear of loss. If your buying team doesn't meet their timelines and their objectives and their readiness for adoption, the business case gets compromised. Then the top line revenue gets compromised, the risk increases, and the cost out modeling of your business case gets challenged. So it gives you an anchor point as a selling team to be professional and defensible in how the process plays out. Because the easiest thing for me to do as a professional seller is to go back to my executives that I'm selling to and say, Sally or John, you're not ready to deploy this. And if we don't get your team trained and aligned and ready, then you're going to miss the business case opportunity that we've all decided is valid. And guess what? If they're professional buyers and they are really focused on solving a critical problem, they're going to go, I got it. Let me go make a few calls, and I'm going to set up an alignment call for us. And they get you right back in the game.
They do.
Now your opportunity is predictable.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, if you don't have this steel thread or this connective tissue, regardless of of what you're selling, you've got to figure out how what you're selling solves to their problem. The connective tissue is what makes it matter to them. Yeah. You're a pro. You're defensible. When finance gets their shot or procurement gets their shot at you, you have a defensible narrative already. The negotiation is done.
Any final thoughts on the proposal side of things?
Well, so if we've done this right, and we have for our whatever company we have a defined sales process, we have a defined sales playbook with very actionable and measurable assets. Those assets collect data. We talked about the nesting dolls. That all fits into the proposal. So everything we've done to this date is a documented digitized trail of information based on all of our conversations, even the negotiation. So what I find as a best practice, and what others find as a best practice, is when you get into this negotiation, you have the defensible narrative in front of you. You give to the buying team or procurement that same digitized champion sell deck, proposal, business case, all in the same asset that your executives signed off on, and you work from it. Now, procurement's going to act as if they don't know or they haven't agreed, and that's fine. But the point is, you have a defensible place. So what you agree to or what you collaborate on, you then document in your champion book, your champion deck, as part of the process, and you read it back to them, to the executives. You're now aligned on what you've agreed to on the phone with procurement or whomever. You've agreed to the solution to their problem or their request, and you've documented it through a closed loop feedback. And what that allows you to do is now you're going to have some more defensibility if they come back for more. And they usually do. But you're setting the precedent that you're going to find a way to maintain the value of the transaction. You're not going to let them negotiate you down, because it changes the dynamics for us as a selling company and for you as a buying company. And we're beyond that. We've done all of this work. Why would we even compromise that now? Mm-hmm. And then hopefully you get executive sponsorship to support you through that process.
Well, Bart, it's been so great to hear you talk about sales process. There's so much passion in this and really great best practices and experience. Any final thoughts, lessons learned that you want to pass on before we wrap up?
There's too many. We'll do more of this. Can we do more of this? We'll have others do it as well, because there's different perspectives. And I think what we aspire to do is collaborate with others on the complexity of this, trying to simplify it and make it an agnostic way that no matter what methodology you use, you can weave it into a sales process playbook and MeddPicc and anchor on very actionable assets and skills that are at what we call the cross-section of value. Selling team, technical selling team, value team, post-selling team, right? Aligned with the customer. That is a value cross-section that if we respect it, our results will go through the roof.
Well, thank you, Bart. It's been fun.
Thank you. Hope that was fun.
It was.